and welcome to Okashicon Online. Ooh, let me move my background so you don't see quite so much of my junk. There we go. I'm Julianne. This is Okashicon Online, and this is Japan Stories, which is your monthly show about Japan travel and Japanese culture. This is the fourth Sunday of the month. That's when we are usually here. We did have a break the last 2 months, and thank you very much for coming back. I know that a lot of you know that we were on hiatus, and I notice a lot of our regulars are not yet showing up on the feed, but I am pretty sure you guys will be coming. So thank you. The people who are here. I know that on 2 different streams, we're seeing different amounts of people. So we do appreciate you spending your Sunday afternoons with us, especially because we know that there are plenty of other things to do on lovely spring afternoons. Let's talk about other announcements. So as you probably are already aware, Okashicon will not be having a live conference this year because we feel that July is maybe not quite safe enough yet, but we will be continuing our online programming here on Okashicon's Twitch page, and we will be having activities throughout the entire year and hopefully be having some live activities, small groups, outdoor things once it is safe for us to gather again and once we find some venues. So we're looking at having like an artist alley type event and certainly tea parties and other things like that. So stay tuned. We do have Okashicon activities and events coming up as soon as we feel that it's safe and as soon as we find appropriate locations. So today, Japan Stories, we are going to be talking about my favorite flower, which is Sakura. It's also the national flower of Japan, and it is in full bloom at the moment in Tokyo. So I have a whole bunch to present to you. If you have questions, comments, if you have seen Sakura, if you would like to go during the Sakura season, please drop a comment in the chat on whatever platform you may be watching on, and I will be happy to try to answer your comments, answer your questions, respond to your comments and things like that, because I know that a lot of people specifically plan their trips so they can make it. This is the most popular tourist season when Japan is letting us in. And a lot of people have questions about how to, prepare for this time of year and other things like that. So I have a bunch of slides, and let's see if we can get the slides up because there's a lot of photos that we have. I had the wonderful opportunity to spend 2 whole months during spring in 2019. And my husband and I really like going there for Sakura season. Unfortunately, obviously last year and this year, Japan is not letting people in, so that we haven't had that option available. But let's go ahead and look at my slides. Let me pull up. So let me get that window open. There we go. Let's see where we can make, there we go. So today's theme is mostly going to be Sakura sites within Tokyo. Now, I have been to other cities, but I wasn't there during the Sakura season, but I wasn't necessarily there during the peak of it. So I can tell you some individual places that I've been, but not necessarily like a full-blown, here's all the really cool places that you can go. Whereas Tokyo, we had 3 full weeks there in 2019. To experience pretty much everything. And if we didn't experience certain things, I will explain why. Certainly access is an issue for me, and that's, if something isn't accessible, there's too many stairs or things like that, then that's places that I haven't gone. But let me move into the extended topics for today. So first I'm going to talk about why Sakura is so popular in Japan, some of the mythology that is associated with it, why it's, I totally forgot at the end, I do have a book recommendation, but I did not put the book title up on a slide, but I will get into that as well. Maybe I'll get into that when I talk about why Sakura is so popular. Then we're going to talk just a tiny, tiny bit about Sakura varieties. I'll be showing you some of the artificial versions that I have. If you attended Monday night's the Sakura-inspired home decor show, you will have already seen these, but there is a reason why I'm going to tell you which varieties of Sakura are blooming at what time, because the Sakura window, the cherry blossom window, is about 2 months based on what different varieties you're after. So, if you can't make it during what we call peak season, there are some other alternatives and other ways that you can still see things, even, up to about 6 to 8 weeks after peak season. Then we'll talk about when to go, when is peak season, and how do you know in advance what it's going to be. And then we're going to get into the photos, and I don't have videos for you today because there's so many photos, but I hope you enjoy them. So we're going to talk about the top views, like the really famous ones that if you go look at a list of, top 5 best places to go see sakura, these are all going to be listed. I also have a second set, which are my personal favorites. Maybe they're a bit more hidden gems, things that haven't been super popular, like the backdrop that I have behind me is obviously one of the most famous places, but I have some that, maybe it takes a local to tell you about, or you have to do more research. And I think those are actually more special and more exciting. Then I'm going to get into sakura flavored foods, which I love. I know that it's very controversial, that some people really enjoy sakura flavors and some people really can't stand it. So as we say in the UK, it's a bit like Marmite. Some people love it, some people hate it. And, it's very much personal taste and personal preference. Let me get my window back up. Sorry about that. I keep popping out of that window. And then we'll talk about special events. So this can be festivals that are on during the sakura season, or Hanami, which is the flower viewing party. I'll talk a little bit about the very large Hanami that we got to attend, and that if you're in Tokyo, I can get you an invite. It is this next coming weekend. I'm assuming that given the time difference, none of y'all are actually in Japan right now. So, but next year, you want to invite this party. If you're going to be there during, the end of March, let me know and I can hook you up with some really fantastic guests that show up at this party. So that is the general agenda for today. Again, if you have questions, I just moved these screens around on myself. That's my own fault. If you have questions, if you have comments, if you have something else that you have experienced, absolutely, I want you to feel free to chime in. I want you to give us your stories, or maybe your experience of missing sakura. Like the first time we went was in April, and we had no idea that it was too late to really see most of these flowers blooming. And we actually wound up getting there for Golden Week instead, which is a whole other story. One thing I will not be covering, because I did so much of it on Monday, is sort of my sakura personal goodies. I will just show you my earrings today, which are from a local Austin creator. The company is called Pretty Kiku. She does sell online at Etsy, and a lot of her earrings are available at Kinokuniya Bookstore, which is one of the Yokoshikon sponsors. And then I'm just going to show you one quick thing. I have collected, and let me know if you want to watch me assemble these, but I have both of the Sakura compatible with Lego, off-brand, these sakura trees, Fushimi Inari Shrine, that is a shrine in Kyoto. I have collected both of those sets, and I'm planning to assemble them in the next few days, kind of give me a little bit of the sakura spirit inside my own house. Obviously have some artificial sakura around, some foods and things like that. Trying to have my own little Hanami party going on. I have a lot of food that I just realized I left in a completely different room, but I think I have enough photos that will give you a very good idea of what I'll be talking about. So before I move off of this slide, I'm just going to give you a little bit of information about why sakura is such a big deal in Japan. I mean, it's kind of hard to even imagine. Maybe you want to make my face big. Sorry, talking to my director here. Maybe you want to make my face big instead of staring at this particular image for a while. Why sakura is such a movement, it's a moment in time, is that for hundreds of years, certainly they have records back over 1,000 years, sakura, which, in case you don't know what sakura is, let me back up because I should have said this. I assume you guys know, but I shouldn't assume. They are ornamental cherry trees. These trees do not produce fruit. They are just the flowers. Each of these flowers bloom for approximately 2 weeks. Depending on the variety, will determine when it is that they're blooming. But they also, where they are, we'll get to that in a minute, where they are in the Japanese archipelago will determine when they bloom as well. But the whole point is that they are a spring variety. My husband is bringing some of these sakura foods over for me to show you. They are a spring, early spring. So again, usually March, sometimes into April. they are a sign of the beginning of a new social year. I do mean social year because it's when schools start. It's when employers hire. Usually new graduates get hired in April. So everything starts around the 1st of April. Sakura used to bloom primarily around the 1st of April, but with climate change, it has been inching up further and further into March. In fact, this year is one of the earliest years in my lifetime anyway. But because this is a beautiful but short-lived flower, it is seen as one of the best examples of a Buddhist principle, which is to live very much in the now and to be mindful of things that are ephemeral, that are short-lived. They will come out into beautiful glory all over cities, all over the countryside, but then 2 weeks later, they are all gone again. And it is meant to remind us about how everything passes, how life can be incredibly wonderful, and yet it still will end at some point. So it is a meditative point, and that is why poets have been writing about cherry blossoms in particular for, as I said, over 1,000 years. It has become the national flower. I can hear that. Sorry, trying to get my husband to turn off the phone over there. Sorry. Now I've lost my train of thought. Yes, it is the national flower. And so it has become basically an icon of the city of Tokyo. It has become a strange, I guess the only way that I can compare it to something in the United States, and this is a very new thing in the United States. You know how about the 1st of September, everything now becomes pumpkin spice. You get pumpkin images on things, you get pumpkin spice flavored foods in every shop you go to, everywhere, and just sort of being completely overwhelmed and surrounded by pumpkin spice, Halloween type stuff. That didn't used to be a thing in the United States, but it has definitely been a Japanese tradition for decades. And part of that, there is a little bit of a dark side to it. So this is unfortunately an unpleasant topic, but I feel like I do need to mention it a little. And that is after the Meiji Revolution and the restoration of the emperor, so we're talking the 1860s. After that, when Japan started opening up to the world and started getting into wars with other countries, China, Russia, World War II, as we would call it, they associated the fleetingness of these blossoms that last for 2 weeks with the glory, I'm going to say glory in quotation marks, with the glory and honor that they were selling to young men who were dying in war. And so recruitment, especially during World War II for kamikaze fighters, was that if you died in the service of Japan in war and you were, assuming you were young, all these men were, late teens, early 20s, that they would be reborn as sakura flowers at the national shrine, at Yasukuni Shrine. I do not mention Yasukuni Shrine in any of this discussion, except for a brief moment when I'll talk about when we know how it's officially sakura season. But yeah, it's very controversial. This is one of the biggest assemblages in Tokyo of sakura trees, but because it is a memorial to the war dead, particularly from the Japanese side of World War II, some of the fighting before that, but particularly for World War II, it can be very controversial for Westerners to go there, and certainly Westerners have made a bad name for themselves by being by trying to bring historical politics into discussions at a current memorial. I'm not going to go any further than that. I'm sure you can imagine the types of discussions that have gone on, and the locals are maybe just not interested in having them because it's still a place of worship. It is not exclusively a war memorial. It is still an active shrine. But all of that kind of goes into why sakura is everywhere at this season. Sort of beginning of February, the sakura merchandise and the sakura flavored food start popping up. The most hot trending topic for the past 3 or 4 years has been the Starbucks merchandise. Starbucks has a huge line of cherry blossom merchandise that people are now buying from all over the world. It sells out very quickly, and that just kind of marks the beginning of zeitgeist, the sort of sakura season, as it were, long before the flowers start blooming. Also important to note that during February is when plum blossoms are blooming. So a lot of people get confused and think, oh, it's early sakura. Those blossoms are kind of hard to tell apart from each other. But yeah, if you're there in February and you think, oh, there's all of these white blossoms out, must be sakura. Well, there are a few trees and a few varieties that bloom that early, but for the most part, you're probably looking at plum instead. So unfortunately, don't think you just got particularly magically lucky. Although when we talk about some of the climate issues that are affecting sakura, I did see an actual sakura blooming in November one year. But that was as a result of climatic changes and typhoons kind of messing up the pheromones. But hopefully that has given you some idea of why sakura is so important to Japanese culture. They really don't have any other comparable holiday that's not religious based or doesn't have some sort of single day experience. They don't have a season where they celebrate things quite so much. I mean, they have certain things that happen in certain years. Obviously, they have festivals all throughout the year, but they aren't kind of like for several weeks at a time where you can kind of dip in and out whenever you like it. So it's an unusual time of year to go, and it is a beautiful time of year to be in Japan. I'm going to very briefly show you in front of my camera some of the artificial sakura that I have, just so that you have an idea of what I'm talking about. This first one that I have here, I have a lot of these. I'm not sure how well you can see it. It is white, very, very little pink, but with some very obvious pistils and stamens, and the classic sakura petal notches. This is a representation of what we call the Some Yoshino variety. Now, Some Yoshino is, first off, I should say all cherry trees that are of a specific variety, other than this term Yamazaka, which just means wild mountain cherry. But if we say Some Yoshino, or we say, Tai-hai, or all these different names, it's important to know that all of these are clones and grafts. These are not wild bred trees. So every single Some Yoshino tree in Japan is based from the same mother plant, and they've just been grafted under rootstock from other trees. But because of this particular coloration, and because they are fairly hardy trees, they're fairly easy to grow and maintain comparatively. They now represent 70% of the blossoming sakura in Japan. There's a lot of problems with that relating to monoculture, and certainly if you have sakura pollen allergies, these can be particularly bad. But when we talk about the dates of sakura, when we talk about sakura season, we are primarily talking about Some Yoshino tree varieties. Now, there are others. There are, and I'll show you some photos of this later, but there are double-petaled varieties. These tend to be a lot later in the season. These tend to be more of your April into early May. Also very popular in China and Taiwan. These are double-petaled. They tend to be more pink. They have a lot more petals on them, as you can see. Some Yoshino have 5 petals and are generally white. They can have a little tinge of pink to them. When you see sakura merchandise, it's going to be this color pink because this was the original sakura, the wild mountain sakura. But for the most part, they don't have a specific season. They're a little bit later, and each variety will have slightly different blooming times. Now, I will mention a particular book that I would really recommend if you are interested in sakura, the botany of sakura, and that is called The Sakura Obsession by Naoko Abe. Let me know if you would like for me to type that in the chat, but you can just go look for The Sakura Obsession. It is a phenomenal book about an English botanist who got really excited by Japanese ornamental cherry blossoms, started raising them in England, and then actually saved some varieties that went extinct in Japan and were able to successfully retransplant them back into Japan. And then Japan later brought other of those back into the UK after he passed away as part of his memorial. Anyway, lots of botany involved, lots of history of the crossbreeding and things like that. So if you really want to go deep down that rabbit hole, The Sakura Obsession is great for those of you who are sakura obsessed. Now, let me move back to the slides because we are going to go much more into photos now. I hope you guys have kind of understood what I was talking about. And again, feel free to ask questions at any point in time. Let me just go ahead and check that there's nothing going on in the chat box. But let's move on. So when we talk about when to go, so remember, this is the forecast for the Some Yoshino variety only. And this was the most recent forecast. It came out just a few days ago. And you'll notice that they start usually quite early, way down in this corner. In fact, Okinawa, they start blooming in January. But then as you move on to more central Japan, you'll see that Fukuoka and Kyushu starts blooming quite soon. The reason why the dates are not on this map is because they'd already started blooming by the 18th of March. Look at that Tokyo date, though, which is the 14th of March. It had previously been forecast for the 21st of March. Last year, it was the 17th of March. Now, this is first bloom, not full bloom, first bloom. But I just want to point out that this has moved up by a full week in the last 2 years. And in fact, it has moved up by a full week from the 10 years before that. So it used to be very much the 1st of April. Now it is tending to start blooming the middle of March. Now, please note that this is the official forecast by the Japan Meteorological Corporation. That is kind of the equivalent of our, National Weather Service. They do start putting out these forecasts as early as January because they are generally fairly accurate based on climatic conditions over the winter. They kind of have an idea, but this year it really surprised them. And as climate change is making the summers and the winters warmer, the sakura are starting to bloom earlier and earlier. Now, as I said, in 2019, they had a bunch of hurricanes in October. I know the Okashikon crew, we got caught in them. Several people will have noticed they were huge. Hagibis was a huge typhoon, closed down the airport, closed down most of Japan for several days. There was intensive flooding, landslides, etc. It was a big, big typhoon. Now, if you don't know a typhoon is what we call a hurricane. Technically, hurricanes are only in the Atlantic. Everything else and all the other oceans are called typhoons, but it's the same thing. So just if you need to mentally consider it a hurricane, it's exactly the same meteorological phenomena. But because of all of those typhoons and the changing of the hot and the cold weather, it really messed up the pheromones of a lot of the Some Yoshino trees. And so about 10% of them did start blooming in November of 2019. So unfortunately, the climate is really, really changing the face of cherry blossoms and ornamental cherry trees throughout Asia. And we really don't know 5 years from now how it's going to shift. Is our current position where it's going to stay? It's very hard to guess. So before 2 weeks ago, I would have said, if you were there the last weekend in March, you would have been fine. You would be guaranteed to see Some Yoshino in the majority of central Honshu. Honshu is the main island of Japan, which is where Tokyo and Osaka and Kyoto are. I would have been able to say for sure that's a great time to go. But now, by the time next week is finished, it will probably be pretty much the end of the season. Right now, it is at peak. It is at a full bloom. Let me just briefly explain when I talk about first bloom. There is one specific tree, the designated official recorded tree in all of these cities. The one in Tokyo is at the Yasukuni Shrine, which is the war memorial shrine. And people have pointed out, if you have friends in Tokyo, they'll all say that tree is a little early. It's even earlier than other trees in the Yasukuni Shrine. So for some reason, that particular tree seems to be 2 to 3 days early when it starts blooming. So I would always say when you see these first bloom dates, add on 7 days for it to really be quite obvious for the trees all over the cities to be out with enough of the blossoms open for it to be very noticeable. We were there on the date of first bloom in 2019, but it was still 4 or 5 days before we could find any other trees that had more than 5 or 10% of the blooms open. So give that 7 days, but then it's really only 10 to 7 days past that they're blooming. After the sort of the 9th day from this first bloom, things start falling. And from then, so this year was the 14th of March, from the 29th of March, things are going to be very limited. You're going to see far more of the green leaves and far less of the blossoms. There's going to be a lot of petals blowing around the air and mostly on the ground at that point. But yeah, you've really only got, 16, 17 days in total to be able to see the Some Yoshino. Now, again, there are other varieties that only start blooming once the Some Yoshino is dying or is, the petals are falling. So you can still see some others in other places. And especially if you're going outside of Tokyo, there are a lot more of the bigger, the double petal varieties, the pink varieties, other places. But if you want to be there for, the season, the experience of it, all the Hanami parties and things like that, then definitely keep an eye out for the first bloom dates and then give yourself until adjustment of about 2 weeks. That's your window of time. Now, hopefully that has cleared up the questions about when it normally is. Obviously, if you cannot go to Japan in March, take a look at this map. Look at Hokkaido. Hokkaido is the island on the top that's in purple. It blooms a full 2 months after Tokyo. So you certainly can see blooming ornamental cherry blossoms in Japan anywhere between January, if you're down in Okinawa and the Ryukyu Islands, all the way up through the middle of May, just depending on where you go. So always keep an eye on this forecast, but the dates are usually within 1 or 2 weeks of each other. So Timmy is saying there are trees in other countries. Obviously, there are. I did mention that China has a lot of very similar varieties, and Taiwan for many decades has been a hotbed of breeding and crossbreeding and coming up with new varieties. They tend to have much more of the pink flowers, and we do have some in Texas, but not in Austin. So if you guys are up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, I know that both the Fort Worth Botanical Gardens and the Dallas Botanical Gardens do have some ornamental cherry trees up there. And they are all very popular in Washington, D.C. Those were all a gift from Japan. We think of the Cherry Blossom Festival in D.C., those were in the 1920s. They were a gift from Japan. And then awkwardly, we went to war with them a couple decades later. But, we have kept those trees in wonderful condition. And I think most Americans, our first exposure to the concept of cherry blossoms as an event would have been through this National Cherry Blossom Festival in DC. They're very beautiful in Maryland and Virginia right now. So this blooming times tend to be quite similar for similar varieties, whether it's in Japan or in the United States. But yeah, there is also what I believe they call the Kwanzaa variety. It is an African variety, and it blooms much later. It's double petaled and it's very pink. Those are apparently possible to grow here in Central Texas. I have a black thumb, so I have not yet tried. But certainly once you get a little bit north of Austin, you can go into big box stores, nurseries or hardware stores, Lowe's, Home Depot, etc., and they have small trees available for you to purchase. But they are these special African varieties that can handle the heat more. But that is the general gist of when the season is. Let's move on to the stuff that you guys really want to see, which is the photos and the places to go. So there's a list of 6 that are kind of like the top most popular places in Tokyo. I have been to all of these at some time or other, although one of them I've not been to during Sakura season, so I will not have photos of that. But let me show you the rest of them. There is the Meguro River, which if you see my background, I don't know how well you can see it, but it's got 2 huge lines. It looks pink in this photo, but the photo is actually, because they've got pink lights on them, these are actually white blossoms in there. And it's always taken at sunset. So again, you get more of that beautiful pink tinge. I will show you my photo that I took at sunset. It does not look like this. But this is probably the most iconic shot. You can't see because it's literally behind me, but there is a narrow little river. It has been embanked on both sides with concrete with beautiful little bridges over it. I'll show you that in just a minute. But it is probably the most famous place for Instagram photos, certainly during this season. There is a small festival. Not really festival, there's some food trucks and things that pop up, but I wasn't able to find those. I found where all the lanterns and things were, but I never did find the food trucks. But this is also the most crowded location because it's just up and down the streets, and it is. The other thing you probably need to know, certainly if you're coming from Texas, is that it's cold. It's really cold still during Sakura season. When we were there, it was still daytime highs, could have been in the 50s, and some days daytime highs were 35. So evening after dark, it was cold. It was below freezing some days. And so we went to one nighttime Sakura viewing, and that was enough for us because I cannot handle cold. So if you are planning on getting this iconic Instagram shot, bring your winter jacket because it is after dark. It's chilly. It's very chilly. Let me just move on quickly through this list and then I'll start showing you the photos. Ueno Park, which is a very famous large park. It has the national museums. There's like, I think 9 different museums there. There's a shrine, there's a temple, there's a lake, there's the zoo. That's where the pandas are. An enormous park. And just after the Second World War, they planted intentionally 150, I think, initially, and then more as time has gone by. They planted sakura trees there specifically as a tourist draw. So a lot of these are quite intentional. You're being drawn to these places because they want your tourist dollars, and they have been plotting this in some cases for 200 years. So Sakura has been a money-making draw for a very long time. Going down the list again, Yoyogi Park, most famous for Hanami parties, and I will be showing you that in the context of the Hanami that I attended. That is near Shinjuku. There's also, speaking of Shinjuku, there's Shinjuku Goen, Shinjuku Park, which is on the other side of Shinjuku. Actually, Yoyogi is closer to Shibuya, and then Shibuya and Shinjuku are fairly near each other. But Shinjuku Park. Oh, hi, Safi. Glad that you're here. So yeah, Shinjuku Park is another one that is really wonderful and famous. It does have an entry fee now. So most of these used to be free, but some of them are starting to charge just because of the sheer numbers of people who come for Hanami. Right now, they're all closed for Hanamis. Like, you can still go in the park, but you cannot have parties there. So some of the smaller parks are still available. But like I said, I have somebody who had a Hanami yesterday in a smaller local park in Shinjuku, and then they're having the big YouTube one at another place. But yeah, because they really haven't started the vaccine rollout very much, they're clamping down on all gatherings, whether they're indoors or outdoors in Japan. Moving on, there's the Chidorigafuchi, which I don't really know what that term means, but it is the moat around the Imperial Palace. It is famous for both looking at the moat itself in the daytime, and you can also like get little kayaks that you can, or rowboats. I'm not really sure which. I couldn't tell. It was way down. You're on a very high platform above looking down. So little rowboats, people out there playing around in the moat with all the sakura trees coming down over the edges of the moat, but also it does have nighttime illuminations. So we did go. Found it disappointing, as you'll be seeing soon. And then the last place that gets mentioned isn't really a place. It's just called Tokyo Midtown, which is really just sort of downtown Tokyo, around Ginza Station, around some of the other stations. And they just have whole streets where both sides of the street have been planted with cherry trees. And it's kind of cool, but it's also kind of hard to get a good vista. You'll see all my photos have the big skyscrapers in the background. But let's move on to seeing the actual photos, because I think that's way more interesting than hearing me talk about it. And for some reason, my computer decided to pop up the reminders app. I don't know why. But let's go to the Meguro River. This is the same scene that you see behind me. Well, actually, there are probably 50 of these bridges. They all look very similar to each other. As you get further and further close to Meguro Station, you see fewer of the apartment complexes. This was actually at the end of our journey on the Sakura Tram, which I will be getting to much later in this broadcast, but it starts in one place and ends at Meguro to get a very exciting full day of Sakura experiences. But because it was a very full day for us and it was our 20th wedding anniversary, we were pretty exhausted by the time we got to this point. So we did stick around until you can tell the sun is setting. It's getting blocked by a lot of the buildings, but then they have these lanterns. The lanterns are just starting to light up at the point that we are there. This again is the classic shot. You can see the lanterns in my background, but that is really what it looked like at sunset. The lighting is not as dramatic as they make it look in these photos. So when you see these wonderful, amazing photos, they have been altered. They have been, I mean, all of my photos are unedited, so I could brighten this up for you. You could see more of it, and I certainly could go. This is right at the train station, so that's why you see the train tracks on the left-hand side of the photo. I could go a little bit further down where you see the trees on both sides, but it's not as bright and luminous as I was expecting. And certainly if you go later in the evening, I'll show you what it looks like at a different place. I just didn't think it was all that. So I know this is one of the most popular places, but it's not one that I personally recommend. This was again during the daytime. These are very much the white Someyoshino trees. So don't let any of these pink photos fool you. That's not what is planted there. You can see up on the upper right-hand side, I have a whole folder of what I call Instagram couples. I like getting both the people who are clearly taking photos for Instagram. You'll see a couple more of those later in the presentation. But yeah, I just didn't think the Meguro River was really, it wasn't for me. There was no place to sit down, which is obviously a problem for me with access. And it was too crowded for what you saw. Now, Ueno Park, again, super famous, very large, quite busy for Hanami parties. Now, we did go on a weekday, so there was not so many people having, this is what I'm saying, not so many people. It is normally shoulder to shoulder, all along the grass, all along the pathways. It is completely impossible to get anywhere during that season. But this is a weekday afternoon where it was certainly less busy than it would be at other times. This is a photo of me standing with my rollator, which my husband took, and that is the photo that I was taking. They have a lot of the weeping cherries. Again, that is a slightly different variety, and as you can see, these are more pink. And so the weeping cherries tend to be a little earlier than some of the others. And then there's another variety of weeping cherries that tends to be later. So another thing that is very popular that I should have mentioned, one of the things that makes the cherry blossom special as opposed to the peach or the plum, you'll notice in all of these photos, as you're sitting underneath the trees, the blossoms are face down. They are looking at you. So it's said to be the friendliest of the floral trees because they're turning their face toward you to greet you and say hello. At least that's certainly one of the explanations I've heard. I'm not sure that there aren't other trees where it faces downwards, but it certainly makes sense that an ornamental tree is not quite so worried about pollination and having its fruit develop, because obviously these trees do not develop fruit whatsoever. Whoops, and that was a video. I did not mean to show you a video there. Okay. My husband is talking about the funicular at Ueno Park, and that funicular is not at Ueno Park. I will get to that in a minute. There is a pretty interesting elevator at Ueno Park, but the funicular, sorry, I'm pointing at him over there. The funicular is a different one we'll get to in just a minute. They do have these wonderful, we're still at Ueno Park here, they do have these wonderful signs all over the place, these cute little mascots. They sell mascot merch. And then they have a festival there. These are actually all of the rubbish and recycling bins, but again, they've made them all cute and put all these really nice little banners on them. Everything's in English, so you know where to put your trash. If you saw my show about festivals that I did last year, you will have seen the festival that was here. I'll give you a brief recap at the end, but they certainly had a pretty exciting time. Now, as you can see, there are cherry blossom trees everywhere you look. There, you can see there, that's my little Goshuin Cho, which you get the stamp from the temple, and it has a beautiful sakura flower on there. That's the stamp to say that you had major prayers at that shrine. It's a bit like a pilgrim badge in the Catholic tradition. We can talk about that some other day. There are other things within the Ueno Park. Oh, I didn't realize these videos are working now. Okay, StreamYard has changed. StreamYard is the platform that we use. So let me back up. You can actually see some of these videos now. I don't know if there's anything really to see. Okay, I'm blaming Timmy on that one. That was a bit of a weird video. He's sitting here laughing. Yeah, sorry, I didn't realize that was even going to play because I used to not play at all from inside a slide presentation. So, wow, I'm excited to know that. But hopefully we won't get caught out with any extra unexpected ones. So they do have, like I said, they have temples, they have a shrine, they have these pagodas, they have huge flower gardens that have other different like chrysanthemums and hydrangeas and other different varieties of flowers that you can go see. It is a really enormous park. There is nothing in Central Texas that compares to it whatsoever. It's enormous. It's the size of probably 20 football fields. I know that's a weird American number. My husband's like, what's a football field? I don't know. It's big. It's really, really big, with many, many, many different attractions that you can go see. And again, this is some of the weeping cherry growing down over the top of one of these temples. See, now my husband is just sitting here talking about me, and we're getting to the Sakura. We will get to the Sakura ice cream. Don't worry, I've got food coming. Food is coming. It's one of my favorites. We are definitely not going without seeing it. Just showing you a bit more. Again, this was sort of the 6th of April, and you can see that most of these trees are already, by the time the green leaves are showing, most of the blossoms have fallen. So, you do have to plan your trip carefully if you want to go to as many places as you possibly can, bearing in mind that this is still a season where the weather can be terrible. It can be rainy and cold and overcast and unpleasant. So if you're looking for sunny days to photograph sakura, you need to have a lot of patience. And it's just another one. This is looking down towards one of the temples. I think there were 2 temples in there. 2 temples and 2 shrines. I do not remember exactly. But anyway, that was Ueno Park. Now let's go to Yoyogi Park. Yoyogi Park, honestly, by itself is not that exciting. It is a large park with lots of trees in it, but they happen to be sakura trees. What it is famous for, though, is for Hanami parties. So I'm going to give you a brief look now, and then when we talk about Hanami later, you'll see more of it. But as you can see, this was on a Saturday. This was 35 degrees outside, so that's why everyone's wearing big puffy coats. It was cold, but there are a lot of people there, probably 20 to 30,000 at any given time. Certainly our Hanami party alone had 200 to 300 people. You see the tarps everywhere because you don't necessarily want to walk on the grass, or you certainly don't want to sit on the grass. You will have there's a whole etiquette I will talk about later. But as you can see, there's just so many people. Yes, you will see masks. This was well before the coronavirus. Those are all pollen masks. One of the reasons why Japan wasn't quite so hard to hit to begin with is because when the coronavirus first came, everyone was wearing these masks anyway because the pollen is crazy there, and everyone has allergies. So that's where all my masks came from too, for allergies. Even outside of the park, they have planted these trees all up and down the street, so you can tell exactly where you're going. If you were with us for our New Year's Eve live stream, this is a park that we kind of saw a bit of as Zach was taking us into a, he walked down this street to get to the shrine where we saw the Hatsumode, the New Year's shrine visit. So he literally walked right down the street. If you haven't seen our New Year's Eve stream, you can go back and watch it. It is on the Akashikan online webpage. Let's talk about Chidorigafuchi, which is a very big mouthful. I just like to call it the Imperial Palace moat. this is the outside of the Imperial Palace that you can go walk around freely. Otherwise, there is the Eastern Gardens that is open during certain hours of the day, and the Western Gardens, which are available only with a tour guide. It is a free tour, but you do have to have a guide to get into that part, and it's only open certain times of the year. But this is in the bit that you can just walk around at any time. This is still very much the outside. The moat is behind you in this photo. So these are still some of the outside guardhouses. I just thought that was a particularly nice photo of the ancient walls there. Remember that this Imperial Palace did get completely bombed to the ground during World War II, so the only extant bits of it are the outbuildings. Everything in the inside where the imperial family lives is brand new and is built in the 1970s, and you're not allowed to visit unless you're, some kind of state guest. But this is the moat itself, and you can start to see where some of the beauty is, because it does have a lot of trees, blooming trees on both sides of the moat, and you can go all the way around. The moat, I think if you were to circumnavigate it, is 4 or 5 miles. So we had definitely not seen the entire thing. We saw some of it during the day and some of it in the evening. Again, you can see this is Ginza. This is downtown Tokyo, basically, just outside of it. This is the most expensive real estate in the world, apparently, because it is very, very centrally located right in the heart of Tokyo, which makes sense. If you are, the ruler of the entire nation and you've been there for a long time, everyone comes to you. So I like some of the photos that have the ancient and the modern all together. Here we go. Now, this is also famous for its nighttime illumination. So when we were talking about Meguro River, this is the other place that is quite well known. But when you say illuminations, it's just some spotlights looking up from the bottom of the trees. Honestly, I was a little bit disappointed by this too. Remember, this is after dark. It was 28 degrees outside and we were freezing. I was in my wheelchair at that point, being pushed, not generating any body heat. And yeah, it was cold and unpleasant, but there were people there. It was fairly late at night. It was probably 9, maybe 10 o'clock at night, and people were still out there on the ground, on their tarps, having their parties, drinking. Probably the alcohol was what was keeping them warm. But yeah, obviously these are the post-work after parties late at night. And I hear that this park is open until 2 a.m. for people to be having their parties for as long as they want to be there. But there's no grass to sit on. It's concrete. That has got to be cold, y'all. But here's just some more examples. Again, this wasn't really in my top things to do at night. It was much more attractive during the daytime. They did have some cool pavement art. I did like that. But yeah, it was also a cloudy day, so maybe that affected it. A lot of our photos came out hazy. It just, I don't know. I feel like that one was completely overhyped. Now, Tokyo Midtown, this is not really one place. Like, certainly I could tell you, go out the Ginza train station, go out this one particular exit. There's a street there, but there's lots of streets where they just have, here's an example. They just happen to have trees on both sides. It's particularly beautiful, but it's not like you're going to go there and sit there. You just walk up and down the streets and see things. A lot of these trees are illuminated at night. In the same way, I think it's lovely if you're just going from point A to point B and you happen to get a view of the trees, but I would not go out of my way for them. Again, I sometimes like the shots that have the very modern buildings in the background or the very modern bridges. But yeah, this is what they're talking about. This is the types of things you can see. You can wander anywhere in any major city, and probably smaller cities in Japan, and get this type of view. Now let's talk about my personal favorites. These are the latter three we kind of all saw in one day, and we will get to that funicular my husband's talking about. But these are a little bit different and a little bit unusual in different ways. So Rikygian Gardens, there are a lot of properties. I think there are 9, maybe 10 properties that used to be samurai feudal lord townhouses. I mean, they're mansions and gardens back in the Edo period. So you're talking 17th century, 17th, 18th century. Eventually, these were sort of, the castles were demolished, the mansions were demolished, and they've all become very classic, very typical Japanese gardens. They all do have an entry fee, which is about 200 to 300 yen. And they have guides. There's a guidebook. There's an app that can give you like an audio guide. The app is completely free. So they are really beautiful to visit. Honestly, I haven't been to one yet that isn't very lovely. But Rikygian is famous for one particular ancient tree. There aren't that many others, but certainly if you come to Tokyo early, this is one of the first ones that'll bloom. So if you were there in the middle of March thinking you're not going to be there late enough to see things, this is certainly one you can go to. It's a very impressive tree. So this is the tree itself. This is all one tree. Let's see if we can see that. That is one beautiful, ancient weeping cherry tree. But that is really what you're going there for. If you're going to see a particular, if you're going there specifically for sakura, this is one of the only trees that they have that's blooming, but it is a very spectacular, amazing ancient tree. I love how they have to put so much care and attention into supporting the branches and to keeping this alive, because sakura are kind of notoriously dangerous after a certain age, because they will grow their limbs to be far too heavy for what they can support. And so it does take a lot of human intervention to keep these trees going. Yeah, as Misty says, love how they support and take care of their plants' landscapes. You'll see that a lot in these traditional Japanese gardens. They'll do it with the evergreens as well. So there are people who their entire job is just to take care of the sakura in each town. And some of them have their own nurseries and things as well to be raising up the clones. Because obviously if you have one tree that is one of these historic ancient trees and it dies and you need to replace it, you can't grow it from seed. You have to have taken cuttings and then grafted it onto another tree if you ever do need to replace it. And some of the more ancient ones in Kyoto in particular, they have had to do that in the last century because they were millennia old trees. And then when that's gone, they wanted to keep the same aesthetic. So they've had to preemptively, they're growing the junior version of this tree 100 years before they need it to replace the original. There were a few other trees, and I do see a lot of people. This was one of the few places where I saw Japanese people in kimono. A lot of these people were here taking sort of graduation photos. Most of the other time when you see people walking around in kimono, they are tourists. So, your mileage will vary. Or they're little old ladies. Little old ladies, they're going to be Japanese. But for the most part, if you see a bunch of young ladies walking around in kimono, they're probably not Japanese. But again, this is that beautiful weeping cherry. There is a pink blush to it, and I think it's a particularly lovely tree. And there was a small festival that was going on, and I will talk about that a little bit later. They had food and they had some stalls, and we'll get to that in a bit. Now, oops, you don't really need to see that. Let's go to another one of my favorites. Now, this is Hanazono Shrine. This is in Shinjuku. I personally love this shrine. This is a panorama that my husband took. So you can see kind of the whole thing in one go. And yes, that is me standing on the bridge. I personally have strong feelings, strong connection to the shrine because my language school, you can kind of see it. You can see the building in the background there. So my language school is actually on the grounds of the shrine. It's between one of the main tories and the shrine gate itself, but they've built all these office buildings that the shrine then leases out as part of their income because it is like right in the middle of Shinjuku, so very popular real estate. But yeah, it's very lovely at any time of year, but particularly I love the vibrant reds and crimsons of the shrine up against the Someyoshino trees. And these, it's very convenient. If you happen to be in Shinjuku for other things, this is literally kind of like a little hidden alleyway in between two buildings. Very, very convenient if you happen to be in that particular area. Very quiet, though. This is one of the main entrances. You can see on the left, they had a bunch of construction because they actually have play productions that are going on, plays and dances, performing arts productions that are going on during this season and for the following month. And then when I was there again in November, they have Tori no Ichi, which if you saw my festival show, you will have seen a lot more of that. Again, just more shots of that shrine. I just happen to really like this particular shrine for a bunch of different reasons. But certainly Sakura is one of them. Now we're going to get into some of the more obscure places. Now, if you are a Tokyo local, you will certainly know about these. Now, the next two, and remember the Meguro River that I talked about originally, these are all on what is called the Sakura Tram line. This is an overground train. It is fully wheelchair accessible. And in fact, if you are in a wheelchair, they do not charge you either. So that's really nice. But it is one line that goes around. It has about 20 stops in the northern part. Well, starts to sort of in the northern and then circles back around. Makes a sort of C-shaped, reverse C-shaped, no, regular C-shaped loop around various parts of Tokyo. But it has so many different places that are famous for their cherry trees. And two of the ones that we went to are Arakawa Park, which is a small but really lovely place. And it has, you'll notice they have all of the lanterns that are set up there. This is my personal favorite photo of all the ones I took. This was no filter, no alteration. Loved the blue sky. I don't know how that sort of magically happened because the sky wasn't that blue in some of the other photos, but that was just, it was a great shot and I love it. These obviously, so we went on the 4th of April, but we had both the Soma Yoshino varieties and some of the double petal varieties. So you notice you have both white ones and pink ones at the same time. So the white ones at that point had been blooming for about 9 days, and the pink ones, as you can kind of tell, are really just still coming out. There's still a lot of buds that have not bloomed on that. There you go, a white one and a pink one at the same shot. Next, we went along the tram a little bit further and we got to Osuyama Park. Now, this is the one with the cool funicular that my husband was talking about. So you get off the tram and you have to go across the street and you have this big set of stairs. And I was like, wait, what? No, I don't do stairs. Fortunately, there is a funicular that goes up the hill. I didn't get a great view. You can see the tram is actually right there in the background, running down the middle of the street. That is the Sakura Tram with Sakura all over the outside of the tram on some of the cars, not all of them. And certainly it has a little Sakura symbol on the little metro symbol as well, which I'll show you in a bit. And then there's this funicular that wraps all the way up the hill. I didn't get a great video going up it like I did of some other funiculars in Japan. It was just so crowded that most of my video was just other people's rear ends, and I decided to spare you that. But yeah, this was a really cool way to get up this huge embankment to the main park itself. Now, this park also has other buildings inside of it. So there are at least 2 museums. There is a local history museum for this particular area, for the Osuyama area, and then also a paper museum, which is industrial paper making. I'll show you one photo of that, but it was a really lovely park. Even though you see steps around various places, I don't think there was any place we couldn't find a ramp to get to somehow. Rikygian Gardens, I should have mentioned as well. It was accessible, but there was one bridge that was terrifying, and we will talk about that next month when we talk about traveling to Japan with mobility issues. We'll be talking to Josh of Accessible Japan, and we'll be talking about, how to get around, especially Tokyo, but certainly anywhere that you may have questions about if you, use a wheelchair or a cane or mobility devices, if you have vision impairments and things like that. All of that we'll talk about next month, and we'll show you this terrifying bridge from Rikygian Gardens. But this particular park was perfectly fine. There were no problems whatsoever. You just kind of had to go around to eventually find a sloped version, a sloped entryway up to the point. You can see families out there having their picnics. This was, again, in the middle of a school day, so it was mostly seniors and moms with very small children. If you were here probably after 5 o'clock, I think this park closed at 6, though. It closed fairly early. But, after work, you might have had more people coming for just a few minutes to sit down, have some lunch from the konbini or that type of thing. Again, another photo of me taking a photo of Sakura, one of my favorite things to do. Again, they have the lanterns. It seems to be a thing. Someone just made this little display. These are actually camellia flowers. if you're into skincare and you like camellia, camellia is actually the tree plant, but then if you let it go into bloom, these beautiful flowers, which in Japanese are also called tsubaki, and tsubaki is a phenomenal skincare ingredient. So if that is your thing, definitely look up camellia sinensis or tsubaki for your skincare. Now, this is the one shot that I said I'd show you of the paper museum. And you're like, wait a minute, that's kimono and that's denim. Yeah, these are made of paper. Something I could talk about on another day. We actually did get from another washi paper factory some towels that are made of paper. Very absorbent and very long wearing. But yeah, as a fiber artist, I found this particularly impressive. But most of the museum is actually about the industrial paper making process rather than hand making. There's another museum that we went to and did a hand making class at that is more the traditional methods. Now, just a quick little recap of that Sakura Tram. It is officially called the Toden Arakawa line, although it goes from two places that are neither Toden nor Arakawa. And it is the SA01 line. So it is on the regular Tokyo Metro map, but is completely above ground. And there are honestly 10 to 15 places that are quite famous. There are some things I really want to go back to at another time. There's some dye workshops. There's really great tourist spots. So even if you're not there during tourist season, this is a very accessible and very convenient tram line for getting around to a lot of really interesting, fascinating places. There I'm just showing you that is the little symbol. It even has the Sakura symbol on it. So in the metro, usually they're just circles. But this one is the exception within Tokyo Metro system. It does have the little Sakura symbol in there. And then this is showing you that this is the platform you're at. Stop number 4, headed towards stop number 30. So I just thought that was cute. I do have video of this train, but I thought this is already a very long presentation. If you are a train spotter and want to watch some of my train video from inside or outside, let me know. I can do that in a future presentation. But let's move on to some of the exciting things in my life that you can experience here in the United States, and that is Sakura flavored foods. This is one of my personal favorite selfies of myself. This is a Sakura Manju. Now, Manju is it's a bit like a stuffed dumpling, but then it's fried. And this one I happen to have at Sensoji Temple. But you can see the sakura filling, sakura and custard filling on the inside. Now, some of you may be asking, what does sakura taste like? And it is a very unique flavor. Let me just pop over and check the chat. Yeah, okay. Obviously, my husband is Tyrannosaurus. He certainly can mostly answer questions if I'm not paying attention. And I will correct him when he's wrong. We've been married 22 years now. I think I've entitled that. But sakura, there are 2 parts of the sakura that can be eaten, and they come from actually 2 different varieties of sakura trees. So you get the petals, which are over there somewhere and I cannot reach. You get the flowers that have been preserved in salt, and so they have been pickled and preserved, and there is there's always salt that's still going to be attached to it, no matter how well you shake it off. He's bringing some more of the foods in here. So these have obviously expired because it's been 2 years, but they were so beautiful I could not actually throw them out. So this is from Rikygian Gardens. It's a yokan that has the sakura flowers in there, so you can see. These are what they look like. There are some teas that you can purchase, which I do have over here as well. Anyway, I won't try to gather all this stuff up just to show you here because I have enough photos. But yeah, you can also get teas that are the flowers that bloom in your teacup. Now, unfortunately, I find that those don't have a lot of flavor to them at all, not even sakura flavor. But the sakura petals, blooms, taste floral for the most part. So if you like rose, violet, lavender, jasmine, flavored foods or teas, then that could be a floral type note that you would like. It also has a little hint of cherry flavoring to it, not a lot, just a little. There's more of it if you eat the leaves, but I'll talk about the leaves in a minute. And then there's a lot of saltiness to it because these all were preserved with salt. So it is a very unique taste. I cannot think of anything else in the world that I've ever had that is quite the same profile, that it's fruity and florally. It's usually sweet because it's usually in desserts, and savory with the saltiness all at the same time. So I know that a lot of people cannot stand it or maybe aren't very enthused by it. I personally absolutely love it. And so things that you can get in the United States fairly easily. This is the Sakuramochi Kitkats. I order things from Tokyo Treats, from Sugoi Mart, which is actually owned by Tokyo Treats. They have a new subscription box. This is you get a lot of Sakura matcha flavored things together as well. So they have the Pocky flavors. Last year there was a Sakura Oreo. All of these were ones that you could get by special ordering from Japan into the United States, or that you can order from some specialist importers. Again, Tokyo Treats, Sugoi Mart, Sakura Co. are all the same company, but they do have like a warehouse in the United States, so it ships from the United States, and you didn't have to get, kind of caught up in the shipping issues that they had last year. Let me see, anything else? So we also have, I can also show you, the director will recognize this because this was my Christmas gift, the Sakura flavored soy sauce, which has little Sakuras on the inside. I even have from Kokoro Cares, which is another subscription box I highly recommend. That is not sweets and desserts, that is gourmet artisanal foods. So there is like a Sakura rice that has the Sakura petals mixed in amongst the rice. So those are all things that you can get in the US. So I want you to go ahead and look at the photos of the things that I was eating in Japan, but realize that you can either make them or order them over here. So let's go ahead and make sure we've got the slides up. There we go. This is just an example of how they were decorating up one of the, this is one of the food stalls at Rikygian, but as part of the festival. But, even the stalls are all decorated with adorable these little flowers from Daiso and other places. This was my first Sakura ice cream. Again, I really like the whole salty ice cream thing. I have not yet tried the soy sauce ice cream, but I hear it's very similar. It's like a sea salted caramel kind of flavor. So this one was similar. It kind of has like a salty carameliness to it, but also with the floral and the slight hint of cherry. You will see more Sakura ice cream in a minute because obviously I've had it every time I could find it. It's probably my absolute favorite. That is one thing you cannot get unless you make it yourself, but I can hook you up with a recipe. These actually are the pickled Sakura in a jar, which you can purchase on Amazon, or you can have sent to you from some of these services. They're kind of expensive to be buying them out of season, but if you go right now, you can get them for $12 to $15, and remember, you only use a tiny bit of it. This is a Sakura Jam, which again I didn't eat until it had expired because I'm one of these people who just saves it for a special occasion, and then the special occasion never happens. I think it's still good, to be honest, but I haven't opened it yet, so I don't know. This was a Sakura Crepe. If you know anything about the Aoyama Flower Market Cafe, it started out as just a regular. So Missy says, I want the jam. You can get the jam on Amazon as well. So I have not looked at the current price because it does change a lot, but I know that you can order that here in the United States too and not have to pay the extra shipping. This is a Sakura Crepe that had Sakura ice cream, Sakura sorbet, Sakura jelly, which is like Jell-O. It had granola. It had, I don't remember what that. Oh, so that was like a mochi, Sakura Mochi in there, and a sweet cream. There was an ice cream on the side, served with real Sakura, real edible Sakura. This was amazing. So yeah, Aoyama Flower Cafe, I cannot recommend it enough. It started out as just a florist shop, and then they decided to open a cafe, and now there are, I think 10 of them around Tokyo, but it started out in Aoyama neighborhood and moved to Asakusa, which is where we often stay. And then they have been branching out around the city. This is a Sakura Mochi. Now, the reason I'm showing you this one, not only is that one of the new flavors of Kit Kat, but this has the leaf on it. Now, the leaf is from the Someyoshino tree. So remember, that's the white one. Again, it is pickled in salt. It is used a lot like a grape leaf. So it is softened and then eaten whole. That has more of the cherry flavoring to it, but again has a little bit of the leafy texture. It's a bit odd. If you don't like grapevines, you may not like that. And then the inside is also made, it's a sticky rice, and then that's been made with the blossoms. So Timmy just asked for the showing the Sakura products again on the big screen. If there's anyone else who would like to see that who is not currently in the room with me, please let me know and I will put it up on the screen again. But I'm not sure if anyone else wants to see that again other than him, who does have to eat these things all the time. So maybe he doesn't know what they are. I don't know. Let's move on. When you go to any convenience store, any konbini, they will have their own selection of Sakura flavored treats. This one is from Famima, which is Family Mart. Home of Famichiki, my favorite fried chicken in Japan. This was honestly horrible. This is probably the only Sakura flavored dessert that I tried that just didn't have any flavor to it at all and just wasn't very nice. Probably wasn't helped by the fact that there was a very drunk old man trying to talk to me the entire time I was trying to eat it. So that probably, didn't help my opinion of it. But other than that, everyone that I have tried has been lovely. This is a Sakura Liqueur, and that does contain a whole blossom in the bottom of it. I will tell you, they do sell these at places like Skytree Mall for, like $15 to $20 for this small bottle. Do not fall for it. Go to Family Mart or Lawson's and pay $6. I was very disappointed to find out that I was ripped off the first time. But yeah, you can find this year-round, not just in spring, and you can find it much less expensively than if you go to some of the tourist traps. And you can see one of my Sakura Furoshiki underneath that. So if you saw the Furoshiki show that I did on Make Your Monday in December, you'll know that I have a huge collection of Sakura Furoshiki. Let's see what else I had. So Koro is a very famous crepe takeaway place. So it's usually in train stations. They had a lovely Sakura matcha crepe. I think I have this is the inside view. So this had more of the Sakura Yokon in it, like I showed you, cut up into a Sakura cream. That was delicious. And all of the Koros that I've had have been really lovely. Probably, 600 million calories, but very tasty. This was another one of the Sakura ice creams that I had. This again, now that you can really see the pickled Sakura on top. They have rehydrated it. That's exactly what they look like when they are, you rehydrate them after they've been salted. Try to wash some of the salt off. Still has a salty flavor, but it's beautiful, even if that's all you have. And certainly there are lots of recipes for just putting this rehydrated Sakura into regular dishes, in regular American dishes, pound cakes and cookies and things like that to get a little bit of Sakura flavor to them. This is another Sakura ice cream. This is from Ueno Park. And this one's not even pink. I was a little disappointed, but it still tasted just as good as all of the others. So again, give that a thumbs up. Pablo, if you don't know Pablo cheese tarts, this is another quite famous chain, usually in train stations. All they sell are different flavors of these little cheese tarts. I first heard about them probably on Tabby Eats. I'm not sure if it's Tabby Eats or only in Japan, but they are amazing. If you like cheesecake, these are like little mini cheesecakes, and then they all have different toppings, different flavors on top. So I've had, tea, I've had sweet potato, I've had obviously Sakura. I could have showed you the real thing, but I thought actually their photo was better than mine. Again, highly recommend if you can eat gluten and dairy products, that Pablo is always worth a stop. And again, probably 6 million calories, but delicious. Back to Aoyama Flower Cafe. This is a granola. This was a breakfast. I had this so many times. This particular time, I was with Lisa Wallens. If you guys saw our New Year's Eve party, you saw Lisa, the lovely Lisa of NHK World. We did meet up there, and that was the first time we met up kind of for breakfast time, and I was like, I'll have granola. And then it's not granola, it's a whole dessert, but all the jellies, all the textures, there's roses in there, there's sakura in there, you can see several different berries. It was amazing. And so I will say that if you used to subscribe to K Club magazine, they kind of stopped producing, and I did create last year a recipe for a Sakura matcha parfait. And if you would like to see that recipe, since I don't think it's ever going to get into print, I can certainly publish that for you on the Akashicon website. But ways that I have used my own Sakura flavored things in a wholly American created dish. I mean, Japanese inspired, but obviously parfait is originally French. Then it went over to Japan, but we can, liberally appropriate from other cuisines. I believe in America, we've certainly stolen everything else from everywhere else. So now, okay, so actually I didn't have the correct, that's in the wrong spot. This is actually festivals. I thought I had a slide title. We're just going to move briefly onto the festival section. I probably do have a title, and it's at the end. But this is back at Rikygian Gardens, where they had just a few stalls that had Sakura-related merchandise. 2 food trucks. One had the lovely amazake, which is the sort of hot, sweet sake that's not alcoholic. It's just made from rice that is only had a few hours to ferment, so it's more just sweetened than anything else. There were all kinds of mochis and other foods, but there weren't a lot of Sakura-specific foods there. But they did have this stall, which is the only place where I have seen it. This is all items that have been dyed with sakura. Now, not the blossoms. This is dyed with the wood. So I did my best to smuggle some sakura wood into the United States. I don't really have enough to do a dye bath with it, but I do have an instructor who is based in Houston who is better at smuggling it in. And so I have had an opportunity to work with it. It does create this peach color. It's not pink, but it is all this sort of soft, lovely peach, which unfortunately does not really suit me. I mean, the t-shirt that I have on now, probably can't see quite so well because of my lighting, but this is that peach color that you would get if you were actually using sakura wood for a dye. The reason why I haven't really tried to do it quite so much myself is I just don't like the result. But then a lot of people will over dye it with some other colors, and I have certainly seen that becoming more popular, like adding sakura together with indigo or other natural dye ingredients. But that's a topic for another day as well. This is what some of the Sakura festivals look like. This is the one at Ueno Park. And again, remember, I already had an entire episode about festivals. You can go back and watch, because a lot of that was these particular Sakura festivals. This is just the food section, and then there's a temple at the far end. Hundreds of different food stalls, and all your regular favorite festival food items were all available there. Everything you can probably think of from any anime that you've ever seen with the summer festival or any kind of, that type of food stall, they had it all there. All the usual suspects, including all the sweet fish and things like that. You guys remember our food on the stick from that collection. This was also, this one is at Sensoji Temple in Asakusa, and the reason why I'm showing you this picture is you see what looks like little sakura trees in the middle? Those are all fake. I thought that was hilarious. It still cracks me up. They do have a few sakura trees in Sensoji Temple, but specifically for the festival, they went and put in some artificial ones just to give it, I guess, a bit more festive flair to it. But they also had the food stalls there. So these would be set up for 2 weeks at a time, usually. These are certainly not one-day events. So some other shrine festivals may only be for 1 to 2 days, but these were certainly set up for quite an extended period. And again, mostly because these were already big tourist attractions. The Rikygian Gardens one, I think, was also 2 weeks, but it started earlier because their cherry blossomed earlier. Yes, the snow cone, or kakigori. I did not have it that day. This was a very windy day, and in fact, some of these stalls blew over on the day that we were there. Like the whole tent just blew on its back. So again, Sakura is a beautiful time, but the weather can be very hit and miss as far as comfort levels. And again, this I think was from Ueno Park, and I can pretty much guarantee that that woman is not Japanese who was wandering around in that kimono. Certainly none of the ones that we spoke to were local. They were all from neighboring countries. And there was the title slide that should have been there. And those are all those again. Oh, you can tell I was doing this quite late. Let's get to my final topic, which is Hanami, which is literal translation is flower viewing, Hanami. But Hanami is the party that you have with your friends or your office colleagues or your family underneath the cherry trees. And this is the YouTuber Hanami that I attended. As you know, our videos do go up on YouTube afterwards, but even you can go to this party if you just watch these people's YouTubes instead of being a YouTube broadcaster. And this is only a small portion of the people that we could get to stop drinking long enough to come be in the photo. I think we had 2 different rounds of photos even because we couldn't get everybody in there. Very classic things you will see though. There's a lot of alcohol. There's a lot of food. They all have these plastic tarps on the ground. Now, an unusual thing you will see in this photo is these are a bunch of Westerners, so we are all wearing shoes because we did not keep these tarps. Normally speaking, though, you would never, ever wear shoes on a tarp at a Hanami. That is considered just as rude as wearing shoes inside someone's house because they keep the tarps and they reuse them from year to year and they don't want to have to wash them. Unfortunately, when you have a party with hundreds of people, it gets spilled on, it gets kind of dirty, and the organizers of this particular event have just decided from personal experience the tarps are too big and too annoying to reuse, so they didn't care about shoes. I could name drop. There's an awful lot of famous YouTubers in that photo. I will not do that for now because you guys, some of your favorites, you'll get to see that photo again in a minute. But this is what the park looks like. Remember, this is Yoyogi Park. This is just the 4 front tarps were our Hanami, or were there at the very beginning, but all those other people were other groups having their Hanami parties. So this is a picnic. You bring your own foods. You don't necessarily have to bring Sakura flavored foods, bring whatever you like, and you're just going to sit out there for hours. Someone gets there early in the morning and sets out their tarp for you to reserve that location. If it's in a business, it's usually the youngest people, the juniors. It's kind of slight bit of hazing. They have to go sit there all day and just sit outside and guard the space while everyone else is relaxing. So yeah, the youngins have to go do the work. As I get older, I'm far more in favor of that system because they can handle sitting on the ground all day and my old bones count. Yeah, as Timmy says, there were thousands of people. I think there were probably 20,000 people in this park, minimum. It was as far as the eye could see in every single direction. And just, I mean, the entire park. So if you were there for something other than attending a party that was prearranged, all you were going to see was other people having a party. It's not the time to just happen to casually go to the park because it was so full. The lines for the bathrooms were super long. The food trucks, they only had, I was very surprised there was only a few food trucks there. And obviously the lines for that were very long. So yeah, only go to Yoyogi and Shinjuku Koen on a weekend if you're going to a party. If you're having your own party, you got to get there. I think they say no later than 8 in the morning. Certainly people start lining up around 6 in the morning or whenever the park's open, depending on the park hours, because Shinjuku Koen has certain opening times. But you know, you got to be there right when it opens to stake your claim. And this is for a party that's happening sort of from noon or 2 o'clock onwards. Some of these parties go on again until midnight, 2 o'clock in the morning. People will start cycling through after about 4 in the afternoon. So if you have an evening party, you can try to that's not even a word, snatch a place that people are vacating. But generally speaking, if it's important to you and you've sort of told people, then, you know, you told people that your party is going to be in this park, you want to be there as early as possible to reserve your spot. And yes, as Timmy said, they're all banned at the moment. Not they're not banned by the city of Tokyo or by the government of Japan, but the parks themselves are banning the hanamis. So you have to go to a local park or a smaller community area that doesn't have strict restrictions if you want to continue to have a hanami now. It's still debatable whether it's safe, but probably being outdoors, especially because it's so windy and breezy, probably one of the safest ways you could gather. But, you know, again, a lot of these facilities are, to be on the safe side, are just not allowing any gatherings. Again, just more, this is what it looks like. This is earlier in the day, just all the people staking their claims on spots, and then the thousands upon thousands of people showing up later. This is what it looked like as we were leaving. It's busy. And then there we go. There's my my celebrity name drop for the day. I think y'all already recognize who that is. Yeah, it's me, right? See, that's the celebrity of the day. But no, I think that's all that I have for you in my slides. That is all of today's presentation. If you have any questions whatsoever, please let me know. I know we didn't have quite a huge attendance today, and I understand it's because we were offline for a few months there as we were dealing with health issue. I had health issues, and you know, we had power issues and things like that. But we do appreciate you being with us on a Sunday afternoon. Please remember that we are here every fourth Sunday of the month, and next month we'll be talking about access issues for disabilities and other types of mobility concerns with Josh Grisdale of Accessible Japan. And in May, we will have Rob from The Real Japan talking about planning a trip, your next trip to Japan, especially if you want to get outside of the major cities. So he will talk us through kind of his experience and how he coaches people on how they decide where they want to go. So if you're like us, you've been a couple times and now you want to go somewhere new, but there's too many places. How do you choose? He's going to walk us through that, and he's also going to give us some tips for how to get around in rural communities where they don't speak English if you don't speak Japanese. So do come back in April and May, and then in June we also have some special presentations coming up with the Sarah the Obento lady and some of her books that are coming out. So we still have plenty of things lined up for you here at OkashiCon Online all the way through the rest of this year. So please give us feedback if there's something that you would like to hear, and if not, thank you so much for joining us. We will see you again next month. And remember that we also have Make Your Mondays and Duma Desu Kakashi, and we'll sneak in a couple anime afternoons throughout the rest of this year too. So thanks again. Mata ne!